In today's fast paced world, making healthy food choices can be a challenge. Dietitian Frances Wild joins us to talk about simple, practical strategies to make healthy eating easier. Before we get started, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and let us know if it's your first time joining us. Frances, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Frances, you've worked with people living with obesity for a long time. I'd like to start out by asking you, what do you feel are the main areas where people really can use support on a weight management journey?
I probably would start with mindset. So many people have tried diets and had them fail them in the past. And I want to be really clear on that. It's not that they failed a diet, but unfortunately, they may end up feeling that way. And that really can kind of have an effect on knocking confidence and really disrupt their ability to look at making more changes because of those negative experiences in the past. So what I try to do is make sure that everyone's aware that this is challenging. There's no one size fits all. And just because something else works for somebody else doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for them. And understanding that it's beyond just the decisions that we make, in the kitchen or when we're buying food out as well. There are so many different things that we don't have control over when it comes to weight management. So if we can kind of have that self-empathy and understand a little bit more about that, it really allows us to approach weight management with a new mindset, taking a kind of view of being a bit more curious, maybe experimenting with a few ideas to see what truly works for the individual, rather than feeling that we should be kind of squeezing ourselves into this preset dietary prescription plan or something like that. And I think when we can get over that hurdle, really we can start to build tools that work for each individual and help them to move towards the goals that they have. Second would be how to approach non-hunger eating. We eat for so many reasons more than just fueling our bodies, for celebration, pleasure, connecting with others, stress, even boredom. So I think if we can build strategies where we can still enjoy food but learn how to navigate those triggers, it can really help to lead to more sustainable weight changes in the future. And then finally, it would be how to navigate the information that we're given to by others. There is no one size fits all, but people are so keen to give other people recommendations and advice. And actually, just jumping straight into that can often have a really damaging effect. So, again, I guess that's similar to my first answer, but what we want to do, make sure is that we really query, is this something that would work for me? Why would it work? Do I understand the background behind that? And if so, how can I go about implementing that in a way that's really tailored to the way that I'm living? So again, thinking a lot about that sustainability for the future.
I feel like sustainability and feasibility is going to be a theme of our conversation. There are lots of wonderful changes we can make, but the question is it a change we can make and then stick to, really is the issue, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think if you're eating in a way that you don't enjoy, if you feel miserable or hard done by the changes that you've made, it may work in a very temporary fashion, but we're not setting ourselves up for success when we take that approach. So definitely we want to be able to sustain and enjoy the way that we're eating.
So we know that our environment can heavily influence our eating habits, from how our kitchens are organized to what's available in vending machines. What are some simple changes we can make to kind of our local environment that can make a big difference in our eating habits?
If we're thinking about building an environment to really align with our goals, I'm a big fan of making the foods that we want to eat less of more difficult to eat, or adding friction. Doesn't mean we shouldn't eat them, but if we can plan to have them when we'd enjoy them the most and minimize temptation when we maybe want to eat them a bit less, that can make a huge difference. So for me, I'm a huge chocoholic. I know if I buy chocolates, I certainly am going to eat them. So if I bought a box of chocolates and left them on the side, without a doubt, within a day or so, they'd be gone. But if I added friction, what I could do is I could put them in a cupboard, so they were harder to reach. Out of sight, out of mind certainly applies here. And if I wanted to eat more of something, I could make it easier for me to do. So maybe if I'm trying to eat more veggies, I would chop them up after I got back from the grocery store and put them at eye level in the fridge. So when I open the fridge, I'm more likely to pick up and snack on, I don't know, the cucumber that I picked up at the weekend rather than those tempting chocolates that are laying on the side because now they're out of the way. Similarly, in other environments. So a lot of my clients find that, coffee shops, those Danishes, they're really, really tempting. I've had some people where they've literally changed the way they walk to the office just so they don't face that temptation. Willpower is not about white knuckling it. In fact, what we can do is create an environment that makes following our goals or makes following that path of eating that we want to kind of follow just much easier, rather than making it harder and trying to resist all of those temptations all the time.
So, food packaging and food marketing can be very misleading. How do you help people look at labels and make more informed choices when they're shopping?
Food packaging has been designed to sell you something. So, of course, it's going to try and put its best foot forward. I mean, I don't know. I don't think any of us would necessarily think Sour Patch Kids were a nutritious food option. I mean, they're delicious, but I don't think anyone would class them as a health food. But if I was a clever marketer, I could probably even spin that. I could say this is a low-fat product that's low sodium and gives you energy when you need it most. These type of deception, they bend the truth to try and really make us purchase what they're selling. So often what I'll say to a lot of my clients is to question the health claims, if not bypass them on the front of the package altogether and flip the package over. Aesthetics also makes a huge difference as well. So if something looks visually appealing, if it looks, I don't know, kind of in a brown packet, organic, or it's green, which often in our heads kind of signals go, that's a healthy option. Just being aware of that can make a big difference in our purchasing options. When it looks to how to decode a food label to really kind of tell how good it is for us, or if this aligns with how we want to be eating, flipping the package over, as I said, can be really helpful, and making sure we're looking at the things that are most important to us. So if someone's concerned about their blood pressure, we want to be looking at sodium. If somebody's thinking about weight, maybe we want to think about how many calories are in this food item. We don't want to be spending hours looking at every single detail on that food label, otherwise it would take days to get around the grocery store. And then the other thing I often like to suggest, it doesn't apply universally, but often it's quite helpful, is the shorter the list of the ingredients, typically the less processed the food item might be. So if we're thinking more broad about general health, if something's got a list of 30 ingredients that we don't understand, we can pretty much guess that that's pretty heavily processed food and may have less health benefits than others.
So many more questions for you, Frances, but we're going to pause here and do our trivia question. Folks, if you answer this question, you'll get our helpful guide to simple swaps that can make your meals a little bit healthier. To get that guide, all you have to do is answer our trivia question, which is, true or false, the national animal of Canada is the moose. Is that true or false? Is the moose the national animal of Canada? Put your best guess in the comments and you'll get that guide to simple, healthy swaps delivered to your Facebook Messenger inbox for free. And folks, if you can think of any friends or family members who might find the information that Frances is sharing helpful, please tag them in the comments so they can tune in too. Frances, let's talk about ultra-processed foods and what we know about how they affect our eating patterns and our health overall.
Ultra-processed foods are a hot topic at the moment. And to be honest, we don't know enough and we're learning more all the time. In fact, as we speak, there are studies being conducted to better understand how these foods affect us. So what we do know, or perhaps it's better to explain even what an ultra-processed food is just a food that's been highly processed. It's far away from the original produce or product that came from the ground, I guess. So these foods, what they do is they can trick us. It really makes it difficult to self-regulate our appetite because they're often hyper palatable. I think about some of my favourite processed foods. Pringles would probably be a really good example here. I could easily devour a tube of Pringles and then have my dinner without really thinking about it. But if I were to have, that same 1,000 calories with a meal before my actual dinner, I'd probably feel a whole lot more full and maybe not be able to eat quite so much afterwards. So they really have this kind of trickery effect where they have this wonderful blend of fats, salts, sugars, crunch that sends our brain into overdrive and makes us want to eat more without us really feeling full. There's a really interesting study. It was small and it was done, I think, in 2019 by Kevin Hall about ultra processed foods, that showed that, when people had two different types of diets, one that was either ultra processed or one that was minimally processed, and everything else was equal. So the macronutrients, the palatability, there was no external foods coming in because this was a closed study. For the group that were eating the ultra processed foods, on average, they needed to consume 500 calories more a day to feel satiated. Now, this was a tiny study. I think there was like 20 people doing it. But now what they're doing is replicating this in larger studies to really understand if this is one of the reasons why, nationally, globally, our weights are creeping up, because these foods are tricking our brain's ability to self-regulate.
So, Frances, it's not just what we eat, but the eating habits that our culture encourages that can be challenging. What are some of the food habits that are just ingrained in our culture that you see really holding people back?
It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because how we enjoy food with friends and family can be incredibly important. It's a really great way to connect with others, and share experiences. But you're right, the way we see foods can also limit or making healthy eating habits more challenging at times. We use food to show our appreciation or love or affection to people. And if, someone's shown how much they care about you by baking, your favorite cake, it's very difficult to say, oh no, thank you, I wasn't planning on eating that today. There are a few ways to approach this that can be really helpful. One is dependent on who the person is or the people are in your life who might be inadvertently making this tricky. Having an open conversation. For many of us, a learned behavior is that we provide food to each other to show that we care or that we're thinking about somebody. But redirecting that can sometimes be really helpful. So I've had some people where they've told their wives or something that, I really appreciate that you bring back my favorite chocolate bar when you've been to the grocery store to show that you've been thinking of me. But I wonder, would you mind, picking me up that magazine that I really enjoy about my hobbies or something like that? So we have like a different outlet for that affection that can sometimes work. For others, it can be having a bit of a rehearsed response can make a big difference. So thank you so much. That's so generous and kind of you. I'd love to enjoy this, but I've just eaten. I'll take it home and enjoy it later. Or why don't you have some now? I don't want to stop you having that, but I'm a little full. I'm going to have a drink right now, or something along those lines. So kind of practicing how we want to navigate those can make a huge difference. I know that the pressure can be quite intense. I often think of my father-in-law with this. Every time I go to visit him, I get half a cheesecake put in front of me because I once said I loved cheesecake. It's true, I do. But it's really difficult because you don't want to insult somebody. So even with best efforts, we can still get these pressures.
I really like the idea of kind of practicing what we're going to say so we aren't caught kind of like deer in the headlights in the moment. What are some creative, healthy food swaps you suggest for people who miss their favorite high-calorie or high-sugar foods?
Some of us might want to reduce the calories, the sugar, the fat by simply just having a smaller portion of the existing food. We can truly enjoy the food that we wanted, but maybe slightly less, and bulk it out with something else that might be lower in calories and larger in volume to kind of feel satisfied from that meal or snack. For other people, it might be better to make an alternative. So I know that a lot of the clients I work with enjoy healthy baking. They cut back a little bit on the sugar. They might use applesauce to add moisture, and they enjoy that kind of baking strategy and can eat that more frequently because the calories are lighter and the saturated fats might be slightly lower as well. I think it really depends on the type of food. If you mess with my lasagna, I don't want to eat a healthy version of lasagna. I'd far rather have a smaller serving of the real stuff. But equally, I have a Ninja Creamy, right? Like I often will make a fruit sorbet, throw in some yogurt, maybe even a protein powder, and make a healthy version of an ice cream. Is it real ice cream? No. But is it good enough to hit that kind of little food itch that we might have on an evening? Absolutely. So I think it really depends on what you want from the experience, and then you can kind of work from there.
Frances, I want to be really clear here. For many people with obesity, changing our diet and exercise habits alone isn't going to be enough to reach a healthier weight. So we're talking about changing our eating habits for better health and to eat sanely, but not necessarily for weight loss, correct?
Correct. That can be really difficult to come to terms with, though, because if we think about everything we read and see about weight in the media, even from seeing medical professionals, we're often told weight loss equals health. And that's not always the case, and it's not always possible. And that's a really difficult thing to get over for many of my clients, because there does become a time when we can't eat any less or move any more and enjoy that way of living, right? If we over restrict, we over exercise, that's not going to be a sustainable approach, and it certainly isn't going to be someone's best weight. So if we're thinking about making changes, if we look at eating healthier, moving more in a way that we enjoy, that feels sustainable, there are huge health benefits from that. We're going to feel better. We're probably going to sleep better. We might even develop coping strategies to navigate stress and feel more in control of foods. So it's really important to not put the emphasis on the number on the scale. Weight is not a behaviour. We cannot control what that number on the scale says. What we can control are the actions that we're taking and the behaviours that we're building.
So, how do you see the role of medications or surgery in the context of a comprehensive obesity management plan?
So clinically, these medications are doing phenomenal things. There are options that we didn't used to have. Even when I started out in dietetics, we didn't have access to these type of treatments. But now, understanding that obesity is a chronic condition, it makes sense, and it's amazing that we have access to these types of prescription medications. They have far wider reaching effects than just the number on the scale. I mean, there are lots of studies that show the impact on cardiovascular health, protecting kidney function. I think there's even a recent trial out that around sleep apnea. So these drugs can have a huge part to play in someone's, treatment pathway. But that isn't the thing that excites me the most about these medications. It's actually working with people who take them. Seeing people who've worked incredibly hard their entire lives to build healthy eating patterns, have an active lifestyle, and effectively fight their own biology. And then they've been prescribed some of these drugs, and they say to me, Fran, it's literally like night and day. The food noise has been quieted. They're no longer feeling ravenously hungry or not satiated by meals. And all of that wonderful foundational work they've put in, those amazing habits that they've built, now start to work more effectively. And understanding that that long-term treatment can support them long-term for a long time, it kind of gives them confidence in the sustainabilities of their actions. So I think that these medications are a really exciting thing to be introduced, and I think we'll see more and more of them as we go into the future. That being said, they're not for everybody, right? Some people don't need to go onto medication. So having a conversation with your physician about the pros and the cons and how they may affect you is incredibly important.
In case you're just joining us, we're here with Frances Wild talking about eating healthy in a sane, sustainable way. And we're giving away our awesome guide that shares simple swaps that can make your meals a little bit healthier if you answer tonight's trivia question, which is, true or false, the national animal of Canada is the moose. Is that true or false? Is the national animal of Canada the moose? Put your best guess in the comments and you'll get that delicious guide delivered to your Facebook Messenger inbox for free. Frances, if someone wants to start making changes to their eating habits to eat more healthfully, where would you encourage them to start?
It's going to be different for everybody. So what I often suggest to people is actually doing a bit of brainstorming, thinking about all of the different things that could have an impact on anyone's weight. All ideas, good, bad, practical, not practical, just getting a lot of different ideas of what we could start with. And once we've got those written down, we can start to organise those thoughts. And what I tend to use as a category to organise those thoughts is to think about what's going to be most impactful and what's going to be what can I see myself most likely doing, right? Because there might be something that's hugely impactful, but I don't know, for me, there's no way I'm getting up at 4 a.m. and heading to the gym, right? So we want to make sure that it's something that we can see ourselves doing and we're setting ourselves up for sustainability and success. So usually when those two kind of criteria align, we may be able to find those small changes that will have a big impact that won't have a negative impact or won't be too challenging to do. We can start to build confidence in our changes. So if you're not somebody that particularly, enjoys chips, but you notice that there's that very easy habit to kind of nibble on them when they're available in the evening, that might be a great place to start. Could I have an alternative snack at this point in time? Because I'm not really going to miss out on those chips. I'm just having them because it's the environmental prompt. But if chips are my favourite food and I spend, a lot of time when I'm going grocery shopping finding my favourite brand to enjoy, that would be a terrible first place to start. So what we really want to make sure is that we're looking at something that's going to be relatively easy, small, and will have an impact on the goals that we're trying to work towards.
So, speaking of kind of that low hanging fruit, we know that eating while we're watching TV or in the car or on our phones, basically when we're distracted, is a challenge for lots of folks. Is this something that you encourage your patients to look at?
Eating when we're distracted can have a huge impact on what we're eating. It limits our awareness of what we're putting into our bodies, and it limits our pleasure that we get from the food because we might not be truly enjoying all of the sensory benefits that we can get from that. So I often will talk to clients about how we can slow down and minimize distractions and prioritize making time to enjoy food throughout the day. If we've sat down and taken time to eat, it's more likely that we'll remember that we have eaten. We might gain more pleasure from that experience. And we may even find that we feel satiated with a smaller portion size. Whereas if we're doing that hand to mouth distracted eating whilst we're answering emails or we're watching our favourite TV show, it's very easy just to keep going until the natural end point is that that snack has ended, rather than tuning into our, hunger and fullness cues that we can do when we're less distracted. So definitely, if possible, we talk about sitting down, minimizing distractions, and enjoying the foods that we're eating.
Frances, last question for you. What is the number one thing you wish everyone knew about weight management?
It's complicated and there's no one size fits all approach. I know we hear that a lot, but I truly mean it. It's so important to individualize our weight management plans because what works for one person might not work for another. And oversimplifying body weight by talking about just energy balance, calories in, calories out, has a hugely damaging effect on how we approach weight management, how people feel about body weight, and just only enhances the unfortunate and difficult stigma that there still is in today's society about weight. So what I would say is making sure that we experiment, approach this with curiosity, try different things and see what works for us, and build a way of eating that we can enjoy and we can sustain, and that aligns with those health goals that we have.
Frances, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been such a fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
And a big thank you to everyone watching at home. We so appreciate you being here and chatting with us in the comments. Before we go, here's the answer to our trivia question. True or false, the national animal of Canada is the moose? The answer is true. If you didn't get to answer the trivia question, but you'd still like our guide to simple, healthy swaps, just leave a comment for us and tell us what you thought of the show. We will be back to you with a new episode in a few weeks. Until then, please stay safe and take good care. Good night.